and let me know that the baby was indeed a girl, but that she tested positive for a rare condition called Trisomy 18. And I was told that my baby would not survive and I should abort her. That's not our choice, that, we're going to let God write her story and that we would continue on with the pregnancy. There was just a lot of things that happened during her life that it was like, I'm losing hope. And then it's back. And that was just God putting the right people in front of us. We didn't get to keep her forever, and it wasn't a miraculous recovery. However, you can totally see the beauty in her life and the purpose in her short little life.
Hey ladies, thanks for joining me again on the Moms Grab Coffee podcast, where our mission is to build your trust in God through every season. I'm your host, Hannah Lapsansky, and I have another amazing guest with me today. Tricia Roos is the author of When Wishes Change, where she recounts her motherhood and faith-fueled journey with her beautiful little girl, Annabelle, who had trisomy 18 and against all odds, lived a miraculous 6 days. Medical experts didn't even expect her to make it to delivery. This testimony is about relentlessly pursuing God and finding incredible hope and purpose in the pain beyond what could ever be imagined. I'm so honored to help share this testimony with you. So, without further ado, grab your coffee and get ready to be encouraged. This is Tricia's story. Well, Tricia, thank you again for making the time to share your beautiful story.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, before we get started and diving into your story, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I live in Dallas, Texas, and I've been a Texas girl my whole life, and ended up at Baylor University, and that's where I met my husband. We started dating while we were there. And after we graduated, we really wanted to start a family and live in Dallas. And so we moved up here, both started our careers. He was in finance and I was working as the director of admissions and head volleyball coach of a Catholic school. And right around 2011, when we'd been married about 6 years, we had our first child, Cameron, and things were going great, again, building kind of on the career in life. And one day he just started asking for a lady baby because he started noticing people around him getting siblings. And so that's when we were pregnant with Annabelle. And then we since have had our daughter, Andy, who's 5 years old.
And you wrote a book called When Wishes Change about your journey with Annabelle, as well as your family, and Cameron played a huge part. And I want to start with the book's description. So it says, this is a mother's version of scaling Mount Everest, an account of the handles that grow out of sheer rock once we commit to a climb. An open-eyed look at blind trust, hardship can end in hope. And when we first hear of your story, it's really hard to envision how it can possibly end in hope. But it does. So I want to dive right in, and let's start at the beginning. Can you take us back to the moment? What was life like before you were told about your daughter Annabelle's rare condition of trisomy 18? And what was your relationship with God at the time?
So my husband and I both we were members of a church. We had a great community group. Our son was really diving into the youth ministry with like the little kids, and we were volunteering. And I think that, in general, we had a really strong faith formation in college. Surprisingly, that's not where most people find their faith, but we did. And so I felt like my relationship with God was really strong, but at the same time, it had never really been tested. I mean, life was pretty easy. My pregnancy with my son, Cameron, was a regular, very healthy, normal pregnancy. And so when we got pregnant with our second, Annabelle, number one, we told people pretty quickly because I didn't see why not. I was pregnant. We were excited to have another child. So I started telling family and friends about our pregnancy. I mean, very shortly after we found out. And again, I was just expecting a normal pregnancy like my other one. However, at the 12-week visit, my doctor, she said that there was a newer option where we could do a blood test to find out the gender of the child. And I'm such a planner. And of course, having a boy, I was like, do I keep all these clothes or am I going to get to pick out some girl clothes? What color do I paint the walls? And so I said, sure, I'll do a blood test. That sounds great. And so we did it. We didn't think much of it. And it was about 10 days later that she called me actually herself and let me know that the baby was indeed a girl, but that she tested positive for a rare condition called trisomy 18. And most people are obviously familiar with Down syndrome. It's super well known. And Down syndrome is called trisomy 21. And trisomy 18 is usually just a more severe version of Down syndrome. And it usually comes with more severe heart and brain conditions. And so in Annabelle's case, she was only going to have a 2-chamber heart instead of 4 chambers. And so unfortunately in the medical community, the expert or the professional that we went to find out and confirm that it was trisomy 18 just really automatically recommended an abortion and to terminate the pregnancy. And of course, when life was going really great and things were normal, and within 24-hour period, it came crashing down, and I was told that my baby would not survive and I should abort her. It was a really, really devastating time for my husband and I. And I remember that we just spent days crying and staying away from everyone to be together. And, neither one of us wanted to have an abortion, but it was confusing because I thought that if they were recommending that it must mean that my life was at stake. Maybe there was something wrong with me, and that's why they would recommend such a thing. But that wasn't the case as I started to research and, Google and figure out what this was all about. And so we did tell that expert and everybody that that's not our choice, that, we're going to let God write her story and that we would continue on with the pregnancy. And of course, like I said, I told everybody in the world I was pregnant. And because pregnancy is so physical, we knew we had to just let this story be known about what was going on with us. Number one, because I really believe in the power of prayer and having like a community and people there for you to understand, what you're going through. But also because, I was showing I was pregnant and I didn't want to have to explain that story, 1,000 times a day. So we just made it known. We sent out a big email to work and family and friends and my volleyball team that I was coaching and just everybody we knew to say, listen, we're not having an abortion. We're keeping this baby and we're going to let God write her story.
And what was your gut reaction when you heard the medical expert's advice to abort?
I think when we initially found out the news, it was just shock. I mean, I couldn't really process what I was being told and what was going on because everything was just spinning in my head. But obviously, that concept of having an abortion after being told all this news just seemed like you're adding to my pain. And why would I do such a thing? But like I said, I thought initially that something had to be wrong with me for them to recommend that. So it just really took a couple days to process why I was being told that and what trisomy 18 was. And I needed time to process and to learn. And then I felt like once I learned more about it and I found out that babies can survive, even if it's for moments, I was like, that's fine. Like, I understand that she may not survive long or maybe not at all. But if my health isn't at stake, I'm not going to give up on this. I want to give her a chance and to see what happens.
And so from the moment you found out to the point where you made the decision, I think you said you were praying a lot with you and your husband. How did God help you make that decision?
I think that after a few days of just processing the situation, and I would say this goes back to my faith and back to the fact that I've coached my whole life. When you're coaching, you are always telling kids, don't give up. Like, no matter what, you fight the good fight, you give it your all. You put one foot in front of the other, no matter how bad it is, and you keep trying. And to me, I thought I was being called in that moment to live out my words through my own actions. Like, I'm always telling other people to work hard and give it your all and fight. But now this was my chance to show that I was going to give it my all for my daughter and to fight for her life. And so once I kind of saw it that way, that this was something that God was giving me like a trial to, show up to bat, I was like, all right, I see it now. And that whole concept of just putting one foot in front of the other and one day at a time, it was a constant battle. I mean, you can't help but just sit there and wonder all day, is she still alive? Is she still there? Is she going to die tomorrow? Is this going to be a stillbirth? Will I have to go through labor? What if she lives for months? What if we, have to make really hard decisions about her life? What I do? Would I incubate her? Would I put her on a ventilator? Like, what's right? What's wrong? How far do you go? And every time all of that came in my head, which was often, I would just have to stop and pray and be like, nope, today is the only day that matters and the only day I have to worry about. And then I'll worry about the future in the future, because it's too much to bear if you worry about all the million scenarios that could happen.
Yeah. And almost for a year too, from the point that you found out to delivery, actually beyond delivery.
Yeah.
So that was a beautiful blessing that she was able to be delivered and her heart was beating and she was breathing. So that was a blessing in and of itself. But that's a long time to wrestle every single day to fight for her and fight for your faith and trust in that.
Yeah, it was hard. And I think that, in the book, I try to be very clear about how vulnerable I try to be in my writing, because I think as Christians, sometimes it's perceived that we'll just have faith. It's super easy, trust that God will just handle it and then be done. And real life, especially in like life or death situations or really hard circumstances, you have to pursue your faith, not just like once a day, like I'm done with my prayers and like God will give me strength, constantly throughout the day and over and over. And every time I would get joy and peace, the second I would lose it, I would have to pray for it again. And it was, just over and over every day. And I've realized now in the last 7 years that I am a person that's susceptible to being anxious and worrying. That's just who I am. And I have to constantly pray for me to give that to God and not be anxious. It's not like I prayed at one time and I was like, cool, I'm not anxious anymore. Thank you, God,
Right. Yeah. Wish it was, right?
Yeah, I do.
So what did your prayer sound like?
So it was kind of interesting how it changed, because sometimes I would pray that this was an accident, that there could be a miracle. And that was really hard because scientifically, like as she was getting larger and the sonograms were more clear, it became very apparent with a 2-chamber heart and a 3-pound baby that this is what the hand that I've been dealt. And I think that over time, God changed those prayers to like, thy will be done. And I just prayed for, like, that's why the book is called When Wishes Change, because I prayed for a miracle, but then I was like, but you know what? I don't think that her heart's just going to grow 2 chambers. Like God can do anything. But if that doesn't happen, I'd really just like to meet her alive, even for a moment. And then when we got full term and we realized it was really possible to meet her alive, then it was like, well, I really pray for hours or even for one day. And then when she was a day old, I was like, oh my gosh, I pray for another day. I pray for another few days. And so my wishes and my prayers kept changing because I was trying to see God's will and his purpose in it. And I was trying not to be completely unrealistic, but then I was also trying to be hopeful. And it's just kind of weird in those circumstances. Like, my grandparents have passed away and other people in my family. And sometimes, especially when a person is like really near death, you just start praying for God's will to be done and for it to be done peacefully and for there not to be pain instead of that miracle, because that they're suffering and that they've lived a good life. And I didn't want my daughter to suffer. And believe me, I called every hospital in the world to just find out, is it even possible to do a surgery on a child like this? And the answer was no. We're not going to do open heart surgery on a 3-pound child. She'll die on the table. And you would much rather be able to hold your child and be with them instead of them being an incubator and die with open heart surgery that's not even possible. And so I just had to let those prayers evolve. And then most of the time, I think towards the end, I would just cry myself to sleep and I just prayed for another day. And that was enough.
Yeah, and I want to go back to a phrase that you said. You said, "This is the hand that I've been dealt." I think in this kind of journey or anything that's really hard and it feels so out of control, you feel like the world's coming down on you. Like, why?
Yes.
This is unfair. And I want to pull out a quote in your book. You were jogging and you said, "Why?" I shouted in my head, "Why give us an innocent baby and let her die? Where are you? Haven't I tried to do the right things?" And I think a lot of times that's where a mind can go. Like, hey, this is not fair. Why is this the journey that I have to go on? So throughout the entire book, you're constantly wrestling and you're praying every single day. So how do you get past that hump when it really feels like too much, like the whole world is on your shoulders? You're praying, you're pressing into God, but it just doesn't feel like you're breaking through.
For me, I'm a very relational person, and it felt really important to me during the pregnancy to find other people out there that have gone down this road that were believers. And so luckily, nowadays there's podcasts, there's Facebook community groups and, different kinds of grieving groups through churches. And I was lucky that through Facebook, there is several like Trisomy 18 moms or Trisomy moms communities. And even when I've been pregnant or I've been at the doctor, I'm like, just tell me what's next. Like, tell me what to expect. Even if it's painful, I just kind of want to prepare my brain for that. So it was helpful for me to specifically connect with other mothers that were down the road farther than me. I remember one had a child that lived a couple months. One I talked to, the baby was a stillbirth. One, the baby only lived for a couple minutes. And although we would cry together and it would be really emotional to hear these stories, it kind of helped me prepare in my head what I might do in each of those scenarios and how it might feel. And so I think for me, just because I'm a person that loves to talk on the phone and talk to people, that's what I needed. I also clung really tightly to my people, like my close friends, people in my church group, people that knew my story. I was definitely not into making brand new friends at that time in my life because I just felt like it was too much. I felt like I didn't want to burden a new friend with all that I'd been going through and just take them down a hole of depression. I was like, I need my people that really understand me. And those are the people that I clung to. So for me, that was it. When it was the darkest moments, I'd pick up the phone and call another mother, text somebody, and that was helpful.
Mm-hmm. And people coming into your life, that was a big theme that stood out in terms of how God showed up throughout your journey to walk alongside you and help you when you were spiraling.
Yeah.
Really, there's so many instances of friends, medical professionals. You mentioned your volleyball team, your Facebook group, Annabelle's Army. That was a huge source of hope for you. So can you tell me more about the moments where God showed up throughout your journey?
I think that, I think I said this in the book, my relationship with God has always been somewhat sarcastic because I'm a sarcastic person. I like to laugh at myself and, just don't take life super seriously. And some of the moments where God really showed up were sarcasm. And so one of those moments is, I'm super pregnant and we find out the state volleyball tournament is in this tiny little Texas town called Corsicana. And every team has to find hotels. And I got on it too late. There were no hotel rooms left. It was there's no rooms at the inn. So we're going to have to sleep in the stable. And one of my volleyball moms is telling me that there's a family at the school that has a lake house out there. And I'm like, oh, that's so sweet of you, Stacy. But we've got 20 girls on the team. We have 5 managers. We have 5 coaches. We need to sleep at least 30 or more people and the bus driver, whatever. And she sends me the link. There's a link, like the house has its own website, which still exists, by the way.
Wow.
And it is out of the middle of nowhere on this tiny town. It is the largest mansion you've ever seen in your life. There's a main house and a guest house, and this place could sleep like 60 people. Everything about it is grand and elaborate. And she's like, yeah, I've already talked to her. She said we could have it for the weekend. And so like the little things that I was stressed out about, and, I mean, I was dealing with so much at work and at home and all my emotions. I just didn't get on booking the hotel as fast as I should have. And I knew that was my fault. But then God shows up and provides the biggest mansion in the whole world for us to stay in.
I love that.
Things like that happened so many times. And you just can't make that stuff up. And even when I'm public speaking, I have a little slideshow where I show the house that we stayed in because it's so ridiculous, this mansion. I've never seen anything like it in my life, to where it's like, you can't make this stuff up. This is what God provided. And then another point in the book when I'm running and I have no water and I'm lost, and I just pick up the phone and call an ex-player, and she's not even home, and I'm standing in front of her aunt's house where she's at. And again, I show that house in my presentation because I'm like, y'all, I'm not making this up. This is like a $20 million mansion with a big old iron fence, like, this gate entry that swings open like you imagine the gates of heaven. And she comes waltzing down to give me water, which is like all over the Bible, right?
Mm-hmm.
But ironically, I had those moments where God's like, just trust me, like, stop thinking that I'm not going to be there for you. And then I find myself the next day doubting again and in tears again because I'm worrying or I'm anxious. And so again, I would have to pursue God and I would have to pursue my faith all over again, even though the day before, a miracle was performed right in front of me. And so I think it's an honest journey about what faith is like sometimes. And I think people need to hear that because real life isn't, like I said, like one prayer for faith or for hope and you're done. And all the anxiety is lifted, especially in really difficult circumstances.
Definitely. And your journey of hardship didn't end after Annabelle was born. I mean, you had this beautiful blessing of being with her for 6 days, but those 6 days were really hard too. So can you tell us about that part of your journey and all the folks that God delivered to support you in that?
Oh my gosh, it was amazing. So first of all, the chances of her, they were basically telling me, prepare if she's alive, that she will die within moments because of this 2-chamber heart, and it's just not possible. And because the hospital, the doctors and nurses, the whole staff of very experienced professionals had not had a live trisomy 18 birth at the hospital that any of them had witnessed, it's kind of like I was a spectacle in the OR room with lots and lots of people in there ready on hand. And after 4 minutes, she took a deep breath and then she's crying and they put her on my chest. And that whole concept of kangaroo care, where they put the baby on the mom's chest to regulate heart rate and all those things. I mean, it was a miracle. She just breathed, but she was breathing. She wasn't purple. She was like a beautiful shade of pink. And they were like, okay, we're doing this. Like, she's breathing. And every step along the way, she was just surprising every doctor and nurse that we encountered. But along the way, she would have apnea episodes where, like, basically when she fell asleep, her body would forget to tell her to breathe. So we'd have to massage her vigorously to like wake her up and, get her going again. And there was a point where it was just really dark. She was having apnea episodes. I thought that was it. We were going to lose her any second. And we got this night nurse named Shelly, who I still keep in touch with. And she was the light that just came in and was like, we're going to try some different things today. We're going to give her a bath. We're going to take care of you. We're going to try again to give her milk on a Q-tip. Eve told me she was not able to. Is like, I don't care. We're going to try it. And all of a sudden that little girl was like sucking milk and
Mm.
she felt better after her bath. And I mean, I was like, thank you, God. Like this miracle nurse came to save us in the middle of the night and restore us back to hope. Because at that point, we're like 3 or 4 days in, we're barely surviving. I haven't slept a minute in days. I'm like hallucinating. And we just kept being given hope. And they did send us home with her by ourselves, which was hard. And she died, in our arms in the middle of the night. But at that point, there was a couple things that happened even then. We had nurses come to our house off the clock and put a feeding tube in her that the hospital had refused to do. And they did it safely on my bed. And it was able to give her food to her belly. And you could tell like how amazing that was to her and how happy she was from that. And so there was just a lot of things that happened during her life that it was like, I'm losing hope. And then it's back. And that was just God putting the right people in front of us. And, again, a lot of movies and books that are Christian are like, happy ending, a miracle happened. She doesn't die. Yay, she lives forever. And that wasn't the case. She did die and we didn't get to keep her forever. And it wasn't, a miraculous recovery. However, you can totally see the beauty in her life and the purpose in her short little life and all the things that have transpired since then that have had this ripple effect on, the Trisomy 18 community and saving other babies from abortion and giving hope to others, and the medical community changing the way that their protocols are done at the hospital when they have a Trisomy 18 baby. And so to me, especially now that I have, time behind me, 7 years, I see it as an amazing blessing. And I'm so honored to have been chosen to be her mother, even though she died. I would do that all over again because I know that we made the right choice for her life.
Yeah. And a blessing that extended far beyond just your family.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. How beautiful. So when she passed away, how did your relationship with God change?
I think that it was similar to the diagnosis. Even though we knew the inevitable that she would pass away, it did not make it easier. The hardest thing, honestly, the hardest moment of my entire life was having to tell Cameron that she was gone, because he had gone the night before. We had decided he needed to start staying the night at the grandparents' house, because it was with all these apnea episodes and me and my husband having to be round the clock care for her. We had nothing left for our 3.5-year-old energy filled boy. And we did not want him to witness her passing when it happened. We just didn't want him to experience some of those things. And when he came back from the grandparents' house the next day, he's running around like crazy. Annabelle, where are you? Are you playing hide and seek? And when we had to tell her that she was gone, I think that in his little mind, we had prepared him all during the pregnancy that God might have to take her back to heal her because her heart was broken, essentially, was the verbiage we used. And he was like, okay, I understand. But then as soon as she was born alive, he was like, oh, cool, we get to keep her forever. Like, I guess she doesn't have to go back to heaven. And so I don't think he understood the idea that once she was born, that she could go back to heaven and die. He did not understand it at all. And so that was, oh my gosh, so hard. And so just like when we found out like the diagnosis, it was shock, it was pain, it was lots of tears. And I think that I was so tired. I mean, I was literally hallucinating and like, in the last couple of days, I was like talking at the wall and people that weren't there because I hadn't slept in 6 days. It took me a while, like days, to process what had happened and like come back to God about it. It wasn't like I wasn't faithful. I was just a mess. I had to, and I remember when I finally fell asleep after she died, I think my husband and I slept for like 15 hours. I woke up and I was like, what time of the day is it? I looked in the crib. I wasn't sure what had happened. There was just a lot of trauma involved, I guess. But I really do feel that because during her pregnancy, I saw so many miracles. And I actually had this dream, really vivid dream, that God was telling me how abundantly blessed we would be and how much impact her life would have, although it would be short. And I very quickly, after I kind of came back to reality, I saw purpose. Even at the funeral, in my dream, I remembered walking down the aisle of a funeral, and it was in my church. It was the light coming in the stained glass in the middle of the day. And that's when the funeral ended up happening, was like after school let out. So all the students at the school I was at could attend. And I remember looking back at the funeral and seeing the light hitting the stained glass and thousands of people. And I was like, wow, I don't know how many of these people maybe don't regularly attend church, or maybe it's been a while, and maybe that this is an opportunity for them to see hope and faith through loss. And after the funeral, especially high school students were like, Coach Ruth, I haven't been to church in a really long time. My faith I lost my faith. And being at the funeral, I renewed my relationship with God. And that clicked with me. I was like, maybe that's why, maybe that's why I had to go through this, so that a couple of teenagers could come to a funeral or to church again and their faith be renewed. And I continue over the years to be like, if I had to go through that much pain, I have to find purpose in the pain. I have to continue to make her life mean something and hopefully draw others to God through her, because I think that's why we went through what we went through.
Yeah, and I can see a generational impact as well. Those teenagers, they grow up and have families. That story is going to be passed down. And even, if they're continuing on their faith journey, that's going to also lead to a generational impact.
Well, and think about that, because this was in 2014. So I was coaching, freshmen through seniors. And so those 18-year-olds, they're 25 now. And so they've started careers, lots of them in the medical field. They've started getting married. They've either started having children or started thinking about children. And I do think a lot about that. Like that particular team, we were so close and so bonded, and we still keep in touch. I'm just thinking, how might that story impact them? So say when they're 30, they have a best friend who has a similar diagnosis, and they're able to share the story that they know about Annabelle with that person,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I have to imagine that there's going to be way more impact than I would ever know, because of how many people knew about our story, followed our journey, and knew Annabelle and what was going on at the time, decades later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I hope so anyway.
Yes, I believe it. I believe it. So in your book, you said, in our common love for Annabelle, God changed what I knew of trust, marriage, faith, perseverance, overcoming, sports, community, obedience, humility, mystery. And so if you could sum it up, who is God?
So I think that God is, I would say God is there all the time. And I think that the main lesson I learned is it's okay to be angry. It's okay to have fear. It's okay to have sadness. It's okay to have doubt. But the point of life and all of this is that we keep pursuing God, because He won't stop pursuing us. And I think I had this vision that once you trusted God, like before, when I had not experienced any kind of tragedy or pain, it was just like a magical thing. Well, of course I trust God. I've never doubted God. It's wrong to have doubt and anger, But when you're going through something and you find yourself at the bottom of the barrel, just gripping on to just get through a day, you can't help but be angry sometimes. But I kept that conversation going with God. I was like, show me why, show me, explain to me, please. Like, I'm begging you for more answers. I'm begging to get more clarity of why I'm going through this. And so instead of being angry and being like, well, screw you, God, I'm done. You clearly don't care about me. I was like, God, I am so angry and I am so sad, but I need you to explain this to me and get me through it. And so it's a weird balance because you are mad and angry and anxious and worried and scared, but you just have to keep coming back to him. And I can tell you wholeheartedly, when I asked, I got answers. When I begged, he gave me peace. And when I threw up my fists in the air while I'm running in anger, he gave me water and he gave me that everlasting like hope. And so I'm okay now when I go through a hard time and I'm uncomfortable with like waddling in it for a while and like wrestling with God to understand the why and the how do I get through this and like show me your purpose in this. I'm not afraid to admit that it's hard sometimes. And I don't think I was like that before.
Yeah, building that honest relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
And meaning bring all the anger, bring all the hurt.
Well, and it's like raising children, right? So I think about that so much, like the father to a child relationship or mother to a child. I mean, if my kid goes behind my back and sneaks the iPad, there are consequences. Or I watch my son in a basketball game struggling, or he goes down and he gets hurt. Like I have to sit back and I have to let him go through that. I can't just go running to rescue him when he makes a bad grade on a test. I have to say, well, honey, you're going to have to get through it and I'm going to be here for you. I will be your advocate, but I need you to learn from this. And I need you to go to the teacher and talk with them and see if you can go into tutoring or fight your way back into this. I need you to talk to your baseball coach and say, hey, I'm struggling with my swing. I'm striking out. Can you help me? And like, I'm there for you all the time, but there are going to be hard times. Like we live in a broken world and I can't save you from everything, but you're going to learn from those things and I'm going to protect you and I'm going to come in as much as I can. And so I felt like that. I felt like I was a lost child all the time. And I was like, God, what's up? Like I'm having a hard day. Could you just help me today through this and give me some glimmer of hope or tell me what I could be doing to make this better? And when I did that, I got answers. It wasn't given to me. I had to seek answers sometimes. Mm-hmm. But I think about that father-son, father-daughter relationship or child-to-parent relationship as such a good analogy to how God is with us.
Yeah, definitely. And when we see him as that father, that parent, I think our disposition changes as well.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, Tricia, you've already imparted lots of wisdom for our moms today. Is there anything else you want to say to those moms who are finding it just really hard to trust that God can turn the hurt on its head, as you say in your book?
Yeah, I think that I've kind of loved this new phrase of saying, allow your wishes to change. Because if you get so stuck in like, this is what I want, this is how I think my life should go, and this is where I thought I would be when I turned 40 or whatever age, you can get so paralyzed in what you wished for before. But when you allow your wishes to change, and when you're like, you know what, maybe I thought when I was this age, I was going to have 3 children, but I only have 2, but I'm okay with that. I had no idea that I was going to lose a child and have to go through something so painful. I would have never wished that. But now that I've gone through it, I know that it made me a stronger person, and I love my kids so deeply, and I see things so differently now than I did before. And so you're never going to wish to go through a trial or an obstacle or to lose your job or to have a bad relationship with your own parents or, to have to go through something hard. Say, okay, curveball. I'm dealing with something I never thought I would. I have cancer. My mom has cancer, or I'm having to go through this really tough time. How do I find all the opportunities that exist in this challenge? And how do I face it to make me and those around me stronger and make my faith stronger? And it's not going to make anything easy. It's just going to give you a different perspective. And like I said, if you're paralyzed in what didn't come true for you, you can really miss out on amazing opportunities that God can provide through loss and tragedy and bad circumstances.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to give moms a place to go to connect with you. Where can they go?
Oh, yes, please do. So on my website, it's just whenwisheschange.com. I'm kind of like a mixed bag. So I do public speaking, and then I wrote the book, and then there's a lot of videos that go with the book that are like behind the scenes footage, because actually this was turned into a documentary and I was followed around by cameras during my entire pregnancy and afterwards. And then I do a lot of consulting as well, because I worked in the private school world. I work with private and independent schools to help them with branding and marketing. But I do have a contact page, and I really feel like if you're a relational person that needs some support or encouragement, I left my job a year ago, like the job I thought I would be in my whole life, because my wishes were changing. I wasn't comfortable anymore. I was not happy anymore. And I took this big leap of faith to leave. And so I've been through that. I've been through child loss. I've been through things not going at all well with how my life, pivots with my parents. My relationship with both of my parents has unfortunately ebbed and flowed based on some circumstances. And I think it's just really important to connect with someone else that can relate to you. So if that's me, I'd love to be that person for you. And if it's not me, like find a community or a support group or through a Facebook community of someone that is going through what you are going through. Because I think building community and relationships is really important, especially for women.
Awesome, Tricia. Well, thank you so much again for your courage, for sharing your story. I love the book. I think I'm going to come back to that book multiple times because there's just so much wisdom in it. So thank you so much.
And it's not long. So for all of you busy people who are like, well, I don't read books. I mean, it takes like a day, right? You get in it and you're stuck in it. And it was a lot longer. And I worked with an editor, and she's like, you know what? We can say a lot with less words and get a really strong message across and bring this down. And I appreciated that, because when I read, a lot of times it is shorter books. Like, I mean, I don't want to read a novel that's like 800 pages. I kind of want to like get my nuggets of wisdom and like feel like I've been changed by something and kind of move on. And so I had that idea in mind for like working in busy moms and busy humans when I was writing the book.
Yeah. Yeah, because mom life gets to be overwhelming.
All the time, every day.
Yes. What a powerful testimony. And I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to speak with Tricia. There's so many things I took away from the conversation. And no matter what season you're in, I hope you remember this. It's okay that you're wrestling with God. Tricia had to pursue God multiple times a day, even after she saw miraculous things happen. It was a constant battle to bring herself back and hold on to God. Don't you wish faith was a one-and-done thing? Kind of like zap ourselves with it and we're powered up for good? Unfortunately, that's not really the case, right? It's like eating. Once we finish a meal, usually we feel really good. Unless it's like a McDonald's Big Mac sandwich and fries, which have way too much of a presence in my life. But usually, after we satiate our appetite, we're pretty satisfied. But a few hours later, we're feeding ourselves again because our body literally needs it. So if you're feeling like your faith isn't strong enough or it's not sustaining you through your trials, know this. That's okay, and you're not alone. Keep spiritually feeding yourself through His Word, through community with others, and through prayer. My guest Rachel Hansberger from episode 2 practices something called conversational prayer. She imagines Jesus sitting in her car passenger seat and just talks to him. Try it out, which brings me to my next point. Tricia's wrestle with God required her to keep him in the ring. She kept conversations with him going. I'll reference Rachel from episode 2 again because there's such relevance here. In her episode, she said, don't shut God out. Even if you're mad, even if you don't understand what's going on, keep that door open for Him to come in. Next, look for how God is providing for you to keep your trust in Him strong. Through people, places, and moments, Tricia saw God's constant presence and expressions of His love. How is God providing for you today? And lastly, allow your wishes to change. Don't paralyze yourself by the things you wished for that did not happen. Look for the opportunities in today's challenges and circumstances and see what God is doing to strengthen yourself, those around you, and your faith. I encourage you to check out Tricia's book, When Wishes Change. I read it in one day and I literally cannot put it down. And I am by no means an avid reader. The link to that and a way to connect with Tricia are in the show notes and momsgrabcoffee.com. Coming up next week, I'm grabbing coffee with Jennifer Toscano from A Heart Full of Hope to talk about her journey through seasons of depression in motherhood. It's going to be amazing, and if you've ever felt blue, you'll want to hear what she has to say. To make sure you don't miss that and more upcoming episodes, subscribe to our email list at momsgrabcoffee.com. That's momsgrabcoffee.com. All right, that's a wrap for today. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. I hope you have an amazing week. I'm Hannah Lapsansky, and I can't wait to grab coffee again with you next time.